And then the day comes when the sons of God appear before the Lord. The adversary is among them. The Lord asks the adversary where he's coming from. The adversary answers God, from roaming up and down and rambling on the earth. The Lord says, "Have you singled out my servant Job to think about? On earth there's none like him. He's good and just. He fears God. He shuns sin." The adversary answers back like so. "Does Job fear God for nothing? Do you not guard and circle around him, circle around his house, and circle all he has? Envelop with your blessing what his hands do, and let his wealth spread across the land. Yet let your hand go out and cast down all he has, and he will curse you to your face." The Lord says to the adversary, "See, all he owns is in your hands. From your grasp I withhold his body only." The adversary leaves the presence of the Lord. Welcome to the continuing translation and discussion of the book of Job. Today we're discussing chapter 1, verses 6 through 12. I'm wearing a suit. That's because the writer of the book of Job has taken us from the world where we encountered Job and his family up into the realm of heaven, into the very presence of God, where the sons of God are presenting themselves to him, and also Hasatan. Hasatan means the adversary. And as Robert Alter points out, it's a title, not a name. Frank Kermode and others point out that it's helpful to have a broad knowledge of the Bible in order to fully understand any one part. I think that's true here. And I think it's helpful to remember an event that takes place in the 36th chapter of Isaiah. The king of Assyria has sent his representative to confront the king in Jerusalem. The Rabshakeh talks to the representative of the king on the wall. The Rabshakeh is down below, speaking loud enough to be heard at a distance. And of course, the entire population of Jerusalem is gathered around to hear what he has to say. The representative of Hezekiah wants the representative of the king of Assyria to speak in Aramaic and not Hebrew, because he doesn't want the people on the wall to listen to the threats and promises of the Rabshakeh from the king of Assyria. I think that's what's going on here. I think that Hasatan, his real audience is not God. His real audience is the accumulated sons of God. And in order to expatiate on that, I'm going to go through an exercise that some scriptwriters use in order to improve their dialogue. I'm going to talk about the thought bubbles behind this conversation that takes place between Hasatan and the Lord. I'm using my imagination. You can use your imagination and interpret what happened differently. Let's start. God sees that Hasatan is there. What's he going to do? Is he going to ignore him, or is he going to be aggressive and take control? Well, it's God. He takes control. So he addresses Hasatan. He said, the Lord asks the adversary where he's coming from. The adversary answers God. Hasatan is poking at God, provoking God. And we'll see whether God takes the bait, or maybe God has already laid a trap for Hasatan. I'm convinced in my own mind that what's happening here is that Hasatan is provoking God by reminding him of the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, because that's where God used to go and walk and have fellowship with his subjects, Adam and Eve, in the cool of the day. It doesn't happen now because of the intervention of a certain serpent. And now it's Hasatan who's walking to and fro over the earth. It is he who acts like he has dominion there. And he says, answering God when God asks him where he's coming from roaming up and down and rambling on the earth. What does God do? God throws down a challenge. God points out to Hasatan that he doesn't have complete dominion, that there's somebody who resists his ways. It's Job. And the Lord says, have you singled out my servant Job to think about? On earth there's none like him. He's good and just. He fears God. He shuns sin. It's almost as if God is recreating the situation in which Adam and Eve fell. Eve famously and Adam famously did not resist sin, but fell for the wiles of the serpent. And God is challenging him, saying, you're not going to be able to do that again. In a way, it makes Job out to be sort of a Noah-like character, a man of virtue in a wicked generation that Hasatan cannot touch. And this gets under Hasatan's skin, and he takes that bait. And Hasatan is simmering, boiling over with resentment of God's protection of Job. And he challenges God. He points out that God is protecting Job, and he challenges God to remove that protection and let Hasatan have his way with Job, to prove that Job, despite God's pride in him, isn't all that, won't be able to resist what Hasatan does to him, and will prove to be as malleable and as any other mortal. Hasatan is promising to turn Job into a God-hater. And this is the challenge that he lays down before all of the sons of God. And God takes up the bet. But he takes it up on his terms. He says, take his property, but leave the man himself alone. At the end of verse 6 of chapter 1, we were following the smoke of Job's sacrifice up into the heavenly realm. Now we're in the heavenly realm, and it concludes with verse 12, with Hasatan leaving the presence of God, obviously returning to earth where he'd been roaming before, and we follow after him, and through this narrative are able to witness what Hasatan does in order to tempt Job to become a God-hater, to curse God.